look at exactly how you can import data into Mosaic. This is very simple, and once you're in Mosaic, all you have to do is click on the File menu, select the Open folder, and on this drop-down menu you'll get a number of options. Today we're going to take you through the two most common, which is the Excel workbook and the CSV files. But as you can see, you can import TXT, SAP data source, or any open document spreadsheet. First thing I'm going to do is show you the spreadsheets themselves. As you can see here, we have a CSV file and an Excel file. The type of data we're looking for is in its simplistic form. So this is a flat file of typical trading data going from ID, posting date, branch, calendar weeks, regions, whether it's male or female, different sales categories, all the way to sort of branches and volumes. If I close this down, go back to Mosaic, I'll now select this file in its Excel format and import it into Mosaic. Now I simply look for the workbook. There it is. Open. Select the trading sheet that I want. And now the data is being read into Mosaic. And there you go. We've taken the data from the Excel spreadsheet, which you can see down here still remains the data source, and we brought it into Mosaic. The column headings are now rows, and now we're in a position to completely personalize our view. And in one click, all your data is arranged on one screen, and you can start to drill in and drill out of the data. What I'm going to do now is show you how easy it is to import a CSV file. Again, open the file, and the format is very similar. There is a slight difference now when you import into Mosaic, which I'll show you, and that is around a few options within the CSV import wizard. So again, I select Open, select CSV file from the menu, find my file, open it. Immediately, I see this import wizard. I have a number of coding options, character sets. I can determine where the row names start. As we saw, this was in row 1 and the data begins in row 2. But there may be areas when it might be row 3 or 4, and this gives you the option. I also can select the delimiter, although this is chosen by default. Perhaps the best thing here is that I can limit the number of records I want to bring in. Or I get a view of exactly what type of data I'm going to be importing, so I can make sure I'm looking at the right files. Again, I press OK, and the data's in. And once again, in one click, we're ready to analyze. What I can do now is save this, to my desktop, and now that's an MZA file. So for example, if I shut down Mosaic, I can double click on Test MZA, and that'll automatically open the Mosaic Analyser. It really is as simple as that. Now that we've seen just how easy it is for you to import data into Mosaic, we're going to look at just how easy it is to start analyzing that data. And to do that, we're going to show you some of the key data mining and drill in, drill out functionality that Mosaic has to offer as an out-of-the-box solution. We're going to look at one of our hedge fund portfolios, but effectively it could be any type of data. You have three views in Mosaic. The one that you're presented as default is what we call our wide mode. This is very similar to the views that you get in your typical tables such as Excel and SQL. And as you can see, all the data is spread over multiple pages, and it makes it very cumbersome to do any kind of analytics or to get an overview of your data. What we do is we compress this. So we push all those files onto one screen. But again, this still looks like a barcode, so we've got to find the similar files and put them together. And that's where the overview mode comes in. So as you can see, you have a complete overview of your entire database. You can see where there's data missing. You can see where there are different shapes within the data. So for example here, you can view that we hold fewer bonds than we do CDSs. You can also see where concentrations are. If you look at our broker or counterparty, we can see that by far Bank of America is much bigger than all the other banks. That could be a concern. But fundamentally at this point, what we allow you to do is to start accessing all these areas of your database. So for example, if I wanted to look at all the bonds that were traded in January, that were double B, they're all presented to me now. Here are all the individual bonds. Here's the information that they share. Here are the specific products. So as you can see, where there is a similarity, Mosaic recognizes that and it shows it as either a single or two separate units. If I go back up to the top, I not only have control of this part of the infoscape, but I can also start rearranging my attributes. For example, if I decide that my counterparty should be at the top, I can put it there. If I decide that I'd like to see the amounts in a bit more detail, I can open this up and get more of a trend line. There's lots that I can do to improve and personalize my view. I can also add headers to tidy up the database a bit. So for example here I can insert header and I can put security info. So I can put the currency, I can put the rate, I can put the tenor, and I can minimize that, drag it down to the bottom, and clean up my view a little bit. Mosaic also allows you to choose not only from the infoscape, but from a number of drop-down menus. As you can see here, we have a number of different products, and it makes it quite difficult to see that all on one screen. So what you can do is drop down to the filter button here. And again, you can pin this to the dashboard so it doesn't move, and you can select the particular products. So for example, by pressing Control I can select a number of different products here, and as you can see they're being highlighted on the infoscape, and I can drill into those, and again I have the same view. So it allows you to very quickly access certain parts of the portfolio. And again, you may need this information, you may not, but the fact that you have access to it so quickly allows you to determine 100 different scenarios within 1 minute. Now that we've been able to import the data into Mosaic, we've seen how we can personalize the infoscape, how we can drill in and drill out to various parts of our database. It makes sense now to enrich that by adding some analytics. And now we're going to look at that in terms of the simple functionality that you have available in Mosaic, and later on we'll look at some of the more sophisticated ways of analysis. We determine a new calculation in Mosaic by right-clicking and defining a new attribute. And in this wizard you have a number of options. A simple attribute, which we'll look at now. A summary attribute, which again we'll look at now. Formula, classification and case differentiation, which we'll look at a bit later on. Let's take simple attributes. There are a number of different things you can do here. You can either assign numbers to objects. This could be done for auditing purposes. Or you could effectively duplicate an attribute. You could put a fixed value for yes and no. For example, again, for audit purposes, you might decide to say, yes, I've looked at this attribute, or I've looked at this number of records. What I personally like is the undefined attribute. And I'm going to create one of those now. This effectively brings an empty cell into your database. And what I'm going to do here is call this quarter classification. And what this will allow me to do is manually choose any of the cells in Mosaic and label them what I want. So for example, I'm going to choose January, February and March, drill in, click there and label this Q1. I'm going to do the next quarter, Q2, and then Q3, and when I zoom out, by default the remainder is Q4. As you can see, I've just created my own classification here. So when I drill into Q1, we can see that we get January, February and March. And now that I've got this new attribute in the database, we can start to run calculations off this new attribute. So it's just a good way of summing up certain parts of the data on an ad hoc basis. This does not affect the source database. This is just your Mosaic database. The next attribute we can show you is the summary attribute. Here again you have two options. The summary of one attribute, such as the count, or the summary of two attributes. So for example, you can do the sum of the amount invested in each asset. I can select interpret missing values as 0. I can also determine at this point whether I want the calculations to be automatic, once after data loading, on a manual basis, or once on definition. I'm going to leave it to automatic. I can choose where I want to insert this attribute, and I can determine as to whether it's coupled or not. Now I'll come to coupling a bit later on. But all I have to do now is say new attribute, and as you can see, we have the sum of investment in each product straight away. Because the calculations are automatic, if I drill into Q1, our predetermined classification, we can see that these have all changed and they've been recalculated automatically. What I'm going to do now is define another attribute. Summary, but this time the sum of one attribute. Now what I want to try and find out here is how many trades we've done over the whole portfolio. So I'm going to choose count from the list, and I'm going to choose the key, because the key is a unique identifier, and the unique identifier in this case is a deal. New attribute. We've done 4,995. Now how many of those are bonds? 399. But again, if I simply click here, I can redefine this attribute and say show me the count of the key by asset, redefine the attribute. Now I've got a split of our trades, and I can really reiterate this as many times as I want. I can also do percentage shares. So for example here, instead of showing in true values, I can show in percentage values the percentage sum of the amount invested in each product. I can insert this attribute after my previous calculation, and now we get in percentage terms exactly how much money we've invested in each asset type. And again, if I go to Q1, these all recalculate. So I can see that in Q1, almost 21% of my investments were in CDSs, which equated to around 300 transactions. In terms of Bank of America, 52% of my business with Bank of America was done in CDS. Now that we've looked at some of the more basic calculation functionality in Mosaic, we're going to look at some of the more complicated ones. But again, these are still very simply executed within Mosaic. The first one I'm going to look at is what we call an analysis group. This is basically creating a cube or a cross table within Mosaic. Now, as you'll remember earlier, we looked at the percentage sum of the amount invested per asset, and then when I clicked into Q1, Q2, Q3, it automatically recalculated. But now what I'm going to do is actually compare the amount that we invested in each asset by quarter, so we no longer have to drill in, drill out. I can see it at a glance. So I'm going to name this analysis group as Quarterly Invest Analysis, and I add that aggregate. So here I'm going to look at the percentage sum of the amount invested in my first dimension, which is going to be the asset type. Your first dimension is effectively your x-axis. And I'm going to click Create Cross Table. And I'm going to select the quarter classification. Now at this point what I'm going to do is click on Value List, and because we only have 1 month in Q4, I'm going to exclude this from our analysis because it might skew it. And then I'm going to click Accept. Now when I click OK, we've created our cross table. Again, this is a collapsible attribute, so I can open it and close it, and I can place it anywhere on the screen. But what we've got here are the asset types, the percentage sum of the amount invested in Q1 versus Q2 versus Q3. So as you can see, for bonds, we've gone from 8.8% in Q1 to 8.46 in Q2 to 7.19 in Q3. And again, if I choose this time Barclays, those numbers recalculate automatically to show me our exposure to Barclays. What I'm going to do now is show you some of the formula calculations you can do in Mosaic. Here we have a number of functions. We can do text searches. We can concatenate the data. We can search specific terms, which means we can do a lot of textual analysis in Mosaic. What I'm going to look for is going to be pretty simple. And we're going to put this if clause in there. So I insert the function. And what I can say is, if the amount is greater than or equal to, let's say, 10 million, then we can put in high net worth. If it's false, we can put in low net worth. And I will create the new attribute. And as we see, it will be inserted after the count here. So now what I can do automatically is say, okay, well, let's look at our high net worth customers, or potentially our low net worth customers. Because I've just created a classification on what's important for my business, which is the amount of money these people are spending with me. For you it may be different. And again, I can do a count at this point. So I can go back to my simple attributes and say, show me a count of the key by my if clause. So as you can see, we've got 3,638 high net worth trades, whereas we've only got 868 low net worth, which is probably a good thing. Again, I can rename this attribute, so I can put it down as customer classification. Finally, we're going to look at classifications. So now what I'm going to do is look at our percentage sum invested, and I'm going to say if that's less than 15%, I'm going to call that low. I'm going to say here, if it's greater, so anything greater than 15%, I'm going to call that high. I'm going to delete this one. So now that I've got the two rules in there, when I click new attribute, as we can see, we've got all our low points of investment and all our high reclassified. The final bit is what we call case differentiation. And this is very similar to the if clause, except for it allows you to put several in this box here. So for example, if the percentage sum of investment is less than 15% and it's a low net worth individual, then call it X. Now that we've been able to enrich our understanding of our database by analyzing further, we can look at how Mosaic can also be used to report on that data, and how you can start creating both simple and advanced dashboards. So what we're going to start doing now is getting some graphical visualizers, showing you how we can drag and drop them around the screen and really personalize your view for reporting. First thing we're going to do is create a pie chart. And I get presented by our wizard. The first thing I'm asked for is an x-axis, and for that we're going to choose the asset type. Now the y-axis. So I'm going to take our percentage sum. Now at this point I can simply click refresh using the Infoscape view, and my pie chart has been drawn. But this looks quite bland. So I go to our toggle, and I can start saying, well, I would really like this to have some labeling. I'd like to modify some of the properties. And here I get a number of different choices, such as 3D, background color, allowing zooming. When we're looking at large amounts of data, I can limit the number of records that come in, or I can set specific algorithms that will take the mean or the average of that data, so I don't need to point 100,000 points at the graph. I can label it. So for example, here I can show a title, and here I can say amount invest in asset. I can comment this is Q1, Q2, Q3. I can label our x-axis, and as we know that's going to be the asset, and our y-axis, which is going to be dollars. I could add prefixes and suffixes, and I could also put optimization thresholds around the amount of data and warning systems that I want to pull through. I'm also going to choose a background color. and in this instance we're going to go with the blue. Again, I click refresh, and my graph's now been drawn. My title is here, my comment is here. Very simple. In the top right hand corner, I have the opportunity to enable automatic updating. If I don't press that, and I click into, for example, Forex, the graph stays as is, and I have to manually refresh. However, if I click the automatic toggle, now when I refresh, and I go into low net worth, Lloyd's, I can start redrawing this chart automatically. We've also designed Mosaic for ease of use. So again, simply by clicking on the menu toolbar here, I can drag and drop this pie chart anywhere on the screen. And for now I'm going to put it behind the main infoscape. I can also change the name here to amount per asset so that I can see it whilst it's being toggled. What we're going to do now is look at how you can use two different axes. In this case we're going to look at the column chart. Again, I have my wizard and I'm being asked for an x-axis, asset, y-axis, and here I'm going to choose two. I'm going to choose the count per asset and I'm going to choose the percentage sum. I'm also being asked for a z-axis, but we'll cover this off later on. So again, if I draw this chart straight away, as you can see it's drawn but doesn't really make much sense because we both have whole numbers and percentage numbers on the same axis. So I go back to my toggle wizard. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to flip the axis of the percentage sum so it runs off a secondary y-axis, and simply just click on this and it will toggle the axis. I'm going to choose this to be a line chart. I'm going to ask for it to have a diamond marker and for it to be a dashed line, and we're going to choose green. Now I'm going to refresh it, but again, as you can see, it looks better, but we still have a problem. My dashed line is behind my columns. So I go back to the toggle, simply drag and drop the order, refresh, and now the chart is looking a lot better. What I can also do is set color coding. So by clicking this button here, I can select three colors of low, medium and high. I can choose my own medium ranges, or I can add an average. And this basically is a type of risk warning or a type of performance warning, showing me which products are doing well, which are doing bad, and I can incorporate this into my chart. I can also add the labels. Again, I will redraw it, and as you can see, we've got 4 asset types which have good trade volumes and 2 which have poor. Again, I'm going to take this and place it behind my pie chart. Now what I'm going to do is actually show you how we can use this information and push it out to a data grid. So that, for example, we can look at individual trades by counterparts. Now this is called the tabular. So I select tabular, and what I'll do now is select the counterpart, select the amount and the product, and add those as my columns. If I draw that straight away, we'll get an Excel view. But what I want to do is start adding some more calculations. So for the amount, I want to know the sum. And for the product, I want to know the count. As you can see, we've got the count and we have the sum. But what I'm going to do now is drag and drop the column header. So now that we've actually classified this whole tabular report by our counterpart. And as you can see, with Bank of America, we have 207 products, totaling a lot of money. If I click this drop down menu, we can see each individual trade. Again, I could choose to label it by product, getting rid of counterpart. So I can look at all our various products and the sums invested in those. Now what I'm going to do is use these three visualizers to start creating a dashboard. I'm going to make all of them automatically updating. So I'm going to place my column chart back over here, resize the window, I'm going to get rid of our toolbar so I have more space, and one nice bit of functionality is hiding the data within the infoscape so that I can get more room to display my charts. So as we can see, we have 3 charts in our dashboard. But now what I can do is look at our quarter classification, and I can say, show me our trades and our business during Q1. And these all automatically read or show me that. So now we've got our dynamic dashboarding, so the information flow moving backwards and forwards. I can save the database at this point. So for example here, I'll save it to my desktop, and I'll call it Hedge Fund Dashboard 1. Now I'll close this dashboard down, bring back my toolbar, and I'll find Hedge Fund Dashboard 1. This now loads the dashboard as and how I left it, so that you've created your own view which you can wake up to every morning. And again, as before, all the charts will automatically update to show you your independent counterparties, or your quarterly revenues, or whatever it is you want to see as a business user. Now that we've looked at how we can create a dashboard within Mosaic, we're going to look at how we can share that with colleagues and how can we export that out to other programs. So what I'm going to do now is create a view, and this is going to be based on the quarter. So I'm going to create a report based on Q1 and Q2 of this year, and create both an Excel output and also another MZA. At the dashboard level, if we go across and click on copy selection, we are now deciding to slice that amount of data and push it out to a separate dashboard. So the first question I get is, do you wish to include all visualizers that correspond to your selection? I'm going to select yes. Now we have a secondary dashboard here with only Q1 and Q2 data associated to it. I can rename the dashboard, so I can call this Q1 through Q2, and I can set a password for it. In this case we're going to use Mosaic 123 Mosaic 123. I'm going to save this and I'm going to call it Q1 Q2. I'm now going to close both this dashboard and the original. Open up my desktop and find Mosaic. Put in my password. And there we have it. Another way of sharing data within Mosaic is exporting this as a report to Excel. So again, I can save this as a report. I can put Q1, Q2 Excel report, desktop, save. If I now go to my desktop, we can see the Q1, Q2 Excel report, and there we go. Both the image and the data have been sent to Excel for a more paper-based reporting platform.